Oh, yeah, I used to go to it, now I just don't have it. Gotta have it there.
Alicia, did that just go to you guys? That just Gardner?
One.
Just Gardner, parent who.
That's too bad.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Cook.
Alicia Hammock.
Jeff Sargent.
Lisa Novak.
Derek Kugel.
Sharon Moore.
Troy Bollinger.
Denise Conrad, staff.
Don Robertson, Interim Director of Community Services.
Thank you. Do we have any citizen comments
No.
on issues and items not on the agenda? Great. Moving on to item. Great.
We don't want any of those comments.
Don't talk.
Or community.
Didn't mean it that way, but that is funny. No. Good
Audio
behavior.
and live streaming tonight.
Yes, we are speaking to the general public. We are not usually like this. We're a little punchy because it's been a rather long evening for us. Starting off with presentations. Do we have any presentations?
No.
Item 4. And moving to item 5 on our agenda, general business. Item 5A, the proposed trail alignment for Gardner Middle School. And looks like we have some documents here. Okay, and who will be speaking this evening regarding that?
If you'd allow me to do a very quick introduction on the topic, and then I'll turn it over to, I'll ask Kelly to illuminate further on my comments.
Great.
Recently, staff was contacted by Kelly from the planning department regarding an issue of a trail alignment proposed for the Gardner Middle School as a part of the reconstruction project. My understanding is that the school will be building a new Gardner Middle School and then removing the old Gardner Middle School and replacing that with sports fields that they'll be losing during the construction of the new Gardner Middle School. Within the Parks Trails Master Plan and transportation plans, there's a call for a trail connection through that vicinity or through that area. Proposed within the site plan is a route to go through that. And there was some issues and concerns regarding that route and amenities associated with that route. The question became, does the PRAC wish to provide comment to staff, both planning and park staff, regarding any suggestions or concerns or ideas for the improvement of that route or for the locations or amenities associated with that route? With that, I will ask Kelly if you wouldn't mind expanding on my comments a little bit.
Here, Denise, is it possible
Yeah.
to bring up the circulation plan that is on the agenda?
I haven't touched this in like 3 years.
Well, I think
These all have it in front of them.
Yeah, we have it in front of us, yeah.
So, yeah, we're kind of low tech over here right
That's
now.
fine. So thanks for having this on your agenda. I reached out to Dawn to, gain some insight from people who, design and build and manage parks and trails for a living, because that's not my expertise and it's not really anyone else who's working on this project's expertise. And so we wanted to get some advice. So the transportation system plan shows a shared use path, project number S40, that crosses through the Gardner Middle School property. So the parks and the trails master plan shows that connection as well. So with the redevelopment of Gardner Middle School, this is the opportunity to actually build that pathway, and the school district has included that in their redevelopment site plan for the project. The TSP, the Transportation System Plan, shows the connection going from Hood Street to Laurel Lane, where there is Laurel Lane is a dead-end street on the east side of the school property. And from the street, there's a pathway that goes between two houses, and it opens up into the school field. So it's a way for, kids to walk to school from that neighborhood. And so the path would come through the site and connect to Laurel Lane. Now, the school clearly has, security needs, and they have shown the pathway along the northern edge of the property so that it doesn't bisect the property, and it can be more or less separated from the main school uses from the building. So instead of cutting through the middle of the site, the path is shown on that northern edge, starting kind of at Ethel Street, and then moving along the northern edge, and then going over to the east to that Laurel Lane connection. So along the northern edge of the property, there would be some tree removal to make room for that pathway. And then if you're looking at the circulation plan, there's a curvy path that is next to the straight path that's right along the property line. There would actually be a connection there. So Wes Rogers has assured us that connection would be made so that if someone is coming through that Laurel Lane path, they can get to the that circular kind of round pathway that then leads down to the
Could I
middle of the
interrupt
site.
just a minute? It's really, because there's so many pictures here of paths and so forth, I'm not
Yeah.
even sure what we're talking about.
I believe it's the aquamarine one on the top.
Is it,
Is it behind the new proposed field?
Yes.
Okay.
It would begin if you look at the new proposed soccer field, if you follow down from the sprint lanes on the track that goes around the soccer
Could you
field.
hold that up a bit, Larry? Yeah.
we can bring it up on the screen.
Yeah, let's do it, because I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's, where I'm getting lost is this, I think this is the new design for the school.
Yeah.
And like in my mind, I'm thinking of what it currently is.
Yeah.
So understanding directionally where we're talking about.
I can't read the street names for one thing, and that's probably my eyesight. Oh, there isn't. Huh?
You can see the Hood Street.
Yeah, I can see what probably is Hood Street, because it says Hood Street bus stop.
Copy this
And this is what she's talking about.
pedestrian circulation. Yeah, I gotcha.
My only idea is where is this where the school is now?
No.
Or are they moving it?
You guys are working on
School
this.
now
Show
is
them.
right, see the blue where the bus pickup is?
Yeah, this is where they're moving into. This is currently sport fields
So
here.
Doug, you see the blue?
So the field's over here, or the school's right here, and this
Yeah,
is
right
the
in the
sport field, so they're just flip-flopping.
Pretty much,
It
yeah.
enters here and follows around.
Okay.
See a little blue dash.
Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So was that yours now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then follows the fence line.
Oh,
It's like that.
oh, that's the trail.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's here.
I'm just trying in relations to where, and I'm directionally
Alicia,
challenged, so north,
I think they're
south.
flip-flopping the fields in the school.
Right.
Okay. Pretty
much.
Currently, the school's over here,
Okay,
and the field's here.
okay,
They'll rebuild the school here, and then rebuild the field there.
okay, perfect, thank you.
You guys see that? Right along with that. Oh, there it is.
Yep, there we go.
You can, does the pointer, can it be traced to the pointer?
Oh, that helps.
Just, I think I understood what you're saying.
Okay, so, right now, school building is here,
Yeah.
right? The track is down here.
Right.
So it's gonna be flipped, and so this is Ethel Street, and this is Hood Street.
Okay.
So right now, the cars and the buses come in on Hood and kind of go in front of the school and then go out on Ethel. That's the circulation. So that's all the buses are gonna be here, the cars are gonna come down here, and the bike and pedestrian main access is gonna be down here as well. So Ethel Street won't really be used a whole lot anymore for vehicles. So the pathway that we're talking about would kind of hug the north property line and come up along the north property line edge and then go to this Laurel Lane pathway. And that cuts through a wooded area that's between two homes, and then you're on Laurel Lane. You can walk north. So the on-site circulation, kind of all these little pathways shown here throughout the site to kind of connect all the different areas. What I was saying is that if you're coming out of this pathway, there will be a connection right there. So that that's all connected. So you won't have to
So
like
another
walk.
path that's not illustrated on this?
Yeah, that's missing from the map, but it will be there. So the questions really, so just to give you an idea of normally when we have developments that have to provide access ways or walkways, we have very prescriptive standards of, it's 7 feet wide and it has landscaping on either side and it has lighting. In this case, this pathway is shown in the Trails Master Plan, which has kind of different design guidelines. And so what the district actually looked to the Trails Plan for guidance on what this trail should actually look like. And so what they've proposed is 8 feet wide pavement with a gravel shoulder on either side. And so this pathway here would be 8 feet wide. And then along the northern edge, it's basically a bunch of backyards. So backyards with 6-foot wood fences for the most part. So it's going to be right along that edge there. The district in the proposal didn't include any lighting. So I think one of our questions is, the hours of the path, and if lighting would, normally we would require it. And the question is, would that make it a safer path? Should that be required? And I'm sure Wes is here to, can provide more information too. So lighting also, knowing that the school wants, security and, wants to keep people that don't belong on school property off of school property while kids are there. One of the options is to put a fence along the inside of the pathway. So somewhere in this area here to separate the path from the remainder of the property. So if you're using the path, you would be kind of in between this fence on the school side and the fences for the backyards.
In a corridor.
In a bit of a corridor, right. So knowing that might not really be the best kind of trail design, another option is to close the pathway during school hours. And so it would not be available for public use during school hours. So we'd like your kind of opinion on those options. And then if we get a little farther into the weeds about the hours, I know parks hours are generally 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So should that be the hours of this pathway, minus school hours potentially? And then Wes also pointed out that, the track is going to be used for track practice after school. So should the public be able to use the path just even during if there's athletic practices after school, or should it also be closed during that time as well? So I think that summarizes all the kind of outstanding issues that there are, and we so this whole project is going to Planning Commission in a week and a half. So the Planning Commission has the ultimate, has the decision-making authority on the overall site design. If the PrAC has comments, then those would be part of the record, and the Planning Commission would hear any comments that you all have as, as part of what they review later this month. Okay.
A corridor of that length just simply isn't that safe.
No.
I would be extremely concerned for anybody, especially a young child or a mother or, somebody that's disabled or whatever, to be walking along that length of a corridor and be confronted and maybe somebody behind trapped with no place to go, no recourse to that. So that would be very concerning to me. That would be that situation would be there. The other thing, though, I think closing the path during school hours is probably a reasonable option, except for those that are maybe looking to use the path in the neighborhood during daylight hours. There may not be that many, but there's going to be some. I don't see a good solution to this, but I don't think a double fence situation is acceptable in any case whatsoever from a safety standpoint.
I have some questions, and first I want to ask questions just so I understand what's being asked, kind of in my terms, so that it works with my brain. Red line is the property line.
Yes.
Inside of that, it belongs to the school district.
Yes.
Outside of that, is the city already a path before we get to the fences, or the wooden fence is right on that line?
The wood fences are on the property line, so
so there is no city property in here?
No.
Okay.
So what there is, there are two cul-de-sacs up north of the school, and there is a little pathway that connects the end of the cul-de-sac to the school right here, and there's another one right here. I think this is Rylands Lane, and then this is Haley Court.
Okay.
And they both have those little narrow pathways that connect the end of the cul-de-sac.
And then those black lines are just the property lines of the other homes, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So the red line then is the property line, and then the two black lines, those are the setbacks. If I'm looking at the legend right, those are the setbacks for the walking path. That's the gravel on either side, right?
Yeah, I'd have to zoom in.
The two black lines with the blue dashed in the middle of it.
Yes.
That's just outlining the outside of that gravel.
I think that's outlining the pavement, and then on either side of that, there would be 2 feet of gravel.
Okay, and so then so this is all school district property.
It is.
And so I guess, so if I understand right, what you're asking is, we have a few options here. Put a fence on the inside, which is designed to keep people off school property during school hours and protect the children.
Right.
Okay, but if we do that, then the question is, do we have gates closed during school or not? My thoughts, similar. The corridor creates issues. However, to me, a bigger issue is wide open space to access students in their play area, right? Because if you don't have a fence, then people walk in, walk on, walk off, right?
Yeah, so the closure, if the path was closed to the public during the day, there would be locked gates at the ends of this pathway right here, this pathway right here, this connection right here, and then also at the dead end of Ethel Street. So that's all proposed to be fenced and gated. And those gates would be on timers, I believe. And so they would just be timed to be unlocked after school hours.
So it's a gate that has a regular knob to go in and out, but the timer locks that. Is that how that works?
Yes.
It's not an open and close, it's more of an unlock lock type timer, okay. So, I guess, is the reason that they want the fence on the inside to have a separation between the public and the students, that's the main reason, right?
Yeah.
And then where does the lighting come into play?
So, the parks, other parks and trails in the city are open till 10 p.m. And so our standards for some of our pedestrian pathways are that they be lit at night. And so this pathway could be treated as one of those pathways that needs lighting or not. So
are we in a position to require that since it's
so the
private property?
The planning commission can require it,
Oh,
and
they can.
you can give your advice to the planning commission.
I mean, I'm all about safety for the students. At the same time, I'm also not interested in requiring things that are not required. I mean, we've got alleyways throughout this entire city behind homes that are not required to be lit. They're gravel. Some of them are probably private. Some of them are public. Some of them are probably half and half because of setbacks and, mixed up lines and everything else. I don't know if we want to get in the business of telling private property owners they have to light something based on public requirements. Although I do like the safety aspect, I guess my comments would be encourage the district to find a way to be safe and light that. But I don't know if I would be interested in requiring it because that's their private property.
Well, but let's go back a little bit. It's
Okay.
not private property, it's publicly owned property that houses a school.
Okay, fair enough, but not city-owned. Maybe I should rephrase, not city-owned property. And so our regulations are built for city-owned properties. I don't know, I go back and forth because I think sometimes we wield power we don't have. And so I don't feel comfortable requiring they do something that is not city-owned property. But I think we can strongly encourage that they do it, and I think their interest is in making sure the kids are safe. So I don't think that's going to be frowned upon. But I do appreciate, I hadn't thought of, but I do appreciate the concern about the corridor aspect and how it potentially, yes, it keeps people away from the kids, but if something happens within that corridor, it locks it within that corridor and eliminates the potential for escape, if you will.
Dangerous.
And that creates an issue. Putting things on timer, I think, can minimize that because it keeps people out of there during school hours. But then what do we do after school hours? Do we open it up so that people can use that walking path at 9 o'clock at night? And now we have a corridor issue? I don't know on that piece.
Okay, Doug, I think you were next, and then.
Yeah, I'm
And
going
then-
to request, and everybody else is raising their hand, you don't jump in, you go through the chair. Anyway, first of all, the connectivity I think is really important. I guess my concern is secondary even at night when it looks like people that are using that path could get access, and this is more for the school district, but it can get access to the other paths and so forth. And if you have vandals coming in, doesn't that enable the people to get into these other pathways and so forth that you have in here and not necessarily be observed by monitors or anything?
You want me to use the microphone?
Yes.
So, I mean, this is more of a school district concern, and so, and less of our.
Normally Kelly and I are talking to each other. So, Yeah, the campus does not have any what you would call intermediate security fencing. So once you get on the site, of course, the building has some areas that are fenced off, the play courtyard and some outdoor classrooms. But yeah, once you get on the site, you pretty much have free roam around the site. That's true. And at this point, you could always go out the front entrance, which is down in the lower left-hand corner of that as well. So the idea being that people could circulate around the site on the weekends, in the evenings, and so forth.
It's not going to be closed.
Is that a concern for you all?
I think at this point, we're willing to work with the community. I mean, if it became a concern and we had incidents that were documented of damage to school district property, we would first work with the Oregon City Police Department and so forth. But if it continued, then we would have to come up with some other ways to secure the property.
I mean, that's the only positive thing I see about the fence, is that, you know, it doesn't permit access off the park into other areas. Of course, they get access to other areas from other places too. I frankly, because that path is so long, I really think that lighting is a good idea. And even though it's not city land, it looks like it's a fair distance to walk without it being lit.
Okay. Anything else, Doug?
No.
Karen?
Okay, and I will say, Wes and his team made a presentation to the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association meeting. Wasn't hugely attended, but a lot of interest. Neighbors didn't express any concern really about this. We were aware of the design plan. The one thing that does strike me a little bit, this is your property. And after dark, walking an unlighted concrete path, you probably don't want that liability. I'm not sure you really have to make them put lights up. It's just safer. But I'm understanding the corridor concept, but I'm also in favor of the school being more secure. And I guess I looked at the fencing, and you can see through it. I didn't stop to think about escaping through it. Are there any intermediate gates along the run of the north side?
The only, again, as shown there, on the inside, there would be, our fence line would be a solid fence line all the way around that path. The only escape points would be those exit points that go into those cul-de-sacs. And otherwise, you're on Ethel Street at the end of Ethel, or you're over on the cul-de-sac entrance on Laurel Lane. So there's really only one. Laurel Lane's an exit. And then you got Rylance and Haley Court.
Yeah, one,
So they're two,
three, four.
And you have we call it a blind corner in the upper right-hand corner. I mean, that's my concern from a safety standpoint. If I was a public user of the path, it would be as you can't see around the corner there, so you don't know what's hiding on the other, if there was something around the corner. That would be where I would be concerned, because you don't have a good line of sight straight down the path because of the corner on there. So that was a concern of ours. And just for the sake of public disclosure, we have built another path where we did light it. That's the path between the high school campus and the community college. That's lit. And so far, it's been in that situation, it's been a good arrangement, I think. We've not had very much, I can't even remember, a reported vandalism there. We've had people leave furniture.
Oh, yes.
So we occasionally have to do a furniture pickup there, but otherwise, it's worked out very well. And I think the lighting there is appreciated, because we do have people taking evening classes at the college and so forth. So that one makes a lot of sense. We do have concerns about after 10 p.m. and we operate our stadium, the sports stadium over on Jackson Street and 12 by the old campus. That is on, those have time gates, and those are timed park hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Because we just don't really want people on our campuses, if we can avoid it, after a reasonable amount of time. And we think that's pretty reasonable. Because we do have people who like to run on our tracks and walk in different conditions. And so we try to make them available to the public as much as we can.
Well, I think I'm leaning against the corridor idea.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Eric, I think was next, and then Jeff.
So as I understand it, though, the campus isn't secured with a fence all the way around it.
Yeah, we've tried to stay away from that institutional feel of that, but it is, where we're talking, it will feel like that. The only place where you won't have secure fencing or the equivalent of secure fencing is down the lower left-hand corner when you start getting to the main entrance and the entry plaza.
Well, I see like I said, the corridor thing, I think, is an epic waste of money. If you have a bad guy, they're going to come onto the school grounds through the parking lot. Not, why, they're not going to have to walk around the path. The lighting, I had concerns on that. I don't know how many of these neighbors are actually going to love having a light in their backyard shining through their windows all night. Could be an option or a problem. And when I look at this, again, as far as the security, I'm all for security. I guarantee you that. But to me, what's the difference between this and Gaffney? With they have essentially the same type of path all the way around it, totally unsecure, I believe. If I'm not
It's
mistaken.
unsecure. I don't believe it's paved.
No, it is not.
It's not a hardscape. And this one is meant, I think the one at Gaffney is kind of meant to be like, we call them a path around the sports field.
Yeah.
Runs kind of like that. Whereas versus this one is a connecting pathway for public use, specifically built for public use. Now, our students will use it when they arrive and dismiss and so forth, the entryways out to the cul-de-sacs and so forth, but this is meant for public use, specifically to support public use in a pedestrian pathway, whereas the one at Gaffney is sort of used by the school for public physical education, walking, running, and so forth, just like we would use our track here. So there is some commonality, but I wouldn't say they're exactly the same. And we don't typically have these kinds of amenities at our elementary schools, as far as a track and a football field, and then a small soccer field, and other grass play fields.
Okay. Jeff?
If you didn't build the fence inside, what would be the hours that the path would be closed?
Yeah. That's a very good question. Our normal school day, and I don't want to bore you with all the school calendars, so I'm assuming we all know generally when school starts in the year and when it ends. So we'll say all summer it's open, unless we have an organized event where somebody's rented the field and then they want to secure those from other users for a while. So for school use, it's generally right now, I would say we'd open the gates at 8 a.m. We could open them earlier, but for school use, it would be 8 a.m. So at 8 a.m. is probably when we would start the closure. So up until then, if we did park hours, we could open it from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. The question, of course, is this time of the year, it's dark. Mm-hmm. So we could open them from 6 to 8, and then we would probably non-spring use, because we don't have fall or winter sports using these fields. So those times of the year, we could probably, I would say, open it back up at 4 o'clock. And so from 4 to 10, it would be open to public use. And then during the spring, because we do have organized track at our middle schools, and this is a very popular program for those middle schoolers, we would probably have to extend that at least an hour to 5. Mm-hmm. And so it would go to 5 p.m. then in the spring. So from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. it'd be open.
Okay, well, I think, given the option, I think I would rather see the minimal closure than I would risk the situation with a closed corridor. I just would feel very uncomfortable. Even myself, I'd feel uncomfortable in a closed corridor like that. So I don't think that's unreasonable. What is that's about 7-8 hours that it would be closed during the day.
Yeah, correct.
So that's probably a reasonable amount of time to not have access to it. I think the public would understand that as well.
Generally, our school calendar, we call it about 170 days of school. Mm-hmm. So about a 365-day year, 170 of those, it would be closed for 7-8 hours.
And generally, I think the path would probably be more popular during the summer anyway, so perhaps.
You'd be surprised, though, at how many people use the stadium, for example, all year long.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
even with snowmobiles.
A few comments, like many, I agree the fence corridor is not a good idea, but I also think one thing that hasn't been mentioned, when you have a corridor type path like that, you're inviting camping and some issues. A paved path draws a different and additional use than like a gravel path, like at Gaffney or at other areas within the city. In terms of lighting, my recollection is the pathway between the high school and CCC, that's really like non-intrusive, low-level lighting and not like a glaring light per se that
we can
would
address that.
disturb neighbors. I think when I walk my dog through there, it's more kind of, knee, ankle height and it's aimed down as opposed to up, and then it's more bird friendly as well. And then in terms of the locking gates, it sounds like the school district already uses those. I guess my concern, I work for Portland Parks and Recreation, and we have locking gates, and we have a lot of issues and a lot of fires we were trying to put out with people trying to find areas at night to sleep at that are, not monitored by cameras, that don't have use after certain hours. So I guess if there were school monitors that could double check, like on a regular plan to actually double check those gates that they're actually locking, I think that would be preventative.
Yeah, well, we have custodial staff on site typically during the school year.
Yeah.
They're there until about 10 p.m. We intend to not only put locks on these gates, but there'll be electronic sensors to tell us where they're at. They're actually if the lock is engaged or not. And then that would be their when they're checking out the campus from 9:30 to 10. That'll be one of their security checks before they go home. Would be make sure those gates are locking or locked. And then we could always have people, we have a pretty extensive security monitoring system that could also monitor those during the night. So if somebody were to breach that gate, it would trigger an alarm. Okay. And then if we had a camera pointed out that direction, we could take a look and see if there was actually people running around or not. And then we would dispatch law enforcement.
Yeah. And I guess my last comment is I think the width of the path with of the cement with the gravel on either side, I think that's brilliant. I pick my son up periodically from the middle school and they're always walking in paths. And then it also helps with mowing as well. So anyway, those are my comments.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I can again. I was on the board when we talked about the bond and preparing it, a few years ago. And one of the things we talked about a lot was making the space available for community use, whether it be common areas, library, gym. And so I commend you for even considering a path that the community could use, because this being the farthest point from the school, oftentimes it's just, let's not worry about how it looks and we'll just leave it up against the fence. And it's, it's kind of like the deep dark corner of the yard. And so this, I think, is really good. And I think we've been talking about the fence with the gates locking. I think the gates locking, but without the fence, I think was a great option. Again, I don't think it's our position to require lighting, but I believe and trust the school district's desire to make it safe and comfortable. We'll definitely consider that. The other challenge I have, the gate's locked right next to the open driveway. Like, they can't get in the gate, they can walk right in the property. The same way the cars go in.
That's actually a pedestrian style vehicle gate, which means it looks like a chain link fence, but it's really a gate. So when it's engaged and locked, it's secured, so you couldn't crawl under it, you have to climb over it. But again, you could climb over all of these perimeter fences because they're 6 feet except
or go to the other corner and walk through.
Yeah.
Right, at some point. So
somebody wants to get on campus, they're going to get on campus.
Yeah, and I think the having escape points to me is more of an interest than the alternative. One thing about that blind corner you mentioned, I think just a suggestion, because I am full of suggestions, Wes.
Sure.
Maybe if because of where it's located, if those shrubs are removed, they aren't you know, at an entry point. They aren't at a front entrance of a school, but if they're removed, that would increase the visibility prior to turning a corner. And that would increase your safety, I think, right around that corner.
That's a good point.
So-
So definitely take a look at that.
My thoughts.
Don?
Not exactly sure what the standard operating procedure is, whether staff participates in the conversations or the deliberations, but I would like to share a couple of thoughts if I
Please.
First of all, regarding the fence corridor, I've racked my brain trying to think of examples of that, and I've come up with two. One is over at Glendevere Golf Course in East Portland. There is a fence, and then the pathway that goes around, you know, the golf course, and then there is immediately adjacent to that, there's an additional fence. It's not for security, it's for protection from golf balls going through that particular stretch. It's about 200 yards long, and people still use it. People use that trail like crazy. But I believe that's the exception. The other example I came up with was the Bear Creek Greenway, the stretch that runs south of Medford to about Phoenix. There's about a 300-yard distance that for private property reasons was fenced on both sides, and nobody used that stretch. The trail itself was very heavily used, but when it got to that stretch, rather than people going through it, and it was predominantly because it was just frightening to get in that tight of an area, they would go out to Highway 99, go up the sidewalks on their bikes or their skateboards or their rollerblades or walking or jogging, bypass that entire section, and then cut through other properties to get back onto the trail. It was not successful at all.
Yeah.
And I would fear that, you know, you'd have a similar problem with this. As far as lighting goes, I would suggest that if the planning commission wanted to move that direction, that they would suggest bollard lighting, which is about 4 feet tall. And it is secure. It's not something you can hit with a bat and break. It's got typically metal rounds around it to protect it. And it would put off enough low-level light and low intensity that the people on the other side of the fence wouldn't know it even existed. So that would solve the glare problems associated with that one.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, the other thing, it might be another design modification. It does have an interior circulation path and possibility if the schools really wanted to have a fence, to put the fence on the other side of that little loop trail that's shown there, and then extend it along the backside of the track to create a bigger space and create some undulation within that to allow people to move around a little bit more freely. The last question I would have is, why does the school district feel the need to secure it during track practice or football practice or soccer practice? So I can point to about 500,000 park facilities where kids are playing and being coached in open parks now, including parks within Oregon City, that are not secured and fenced during those sessions, whether it's Little League or the youth soccer groups or whatnot, whether it's in our parks or Portland's parks or any other parks. You know, they're out there being used, and frankly, in my opinion, when you have a school located within a neighborhood that doesn't necessarily have a park immediately adjacent to it, that is the park. And yes, it does have a big building in it that's occupied, and people understand inherently that they should not be out in there during the school hours, but during non-school hours, even if there are sports practices going on, it's fairly generally accepted amongst most people that they can be able to walk across there, stop and enjoy watching the game that's going on during that time, whether they're a parent or, you know, an older adult within the neighborhood. So in my mind, I have a hard time following the logic of needing to secure the grounds just because there's a sporting event going on, unless you're charging admission to that sporting event. So just my thoughts. I guess at this point, I would want to turn it back to Kelly and ask if she's receiving enough input, and does she need a formal action?
I think Doug had one more comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's the point you rose. When you have sports activities Are all the kids gone once the activity's there? That is, the adults make sure all the kids are out of there? I mean, that's the only concern I could see if you had some of the kids from the sports activity still hanging in there, no adult supervision, and whether you think more of things happening to little kids in elementary school, but even so.
Yeah. I would make the distinction between a community sports activity and a school-sponsored, school-organized activity that students can elect to take after school. And so this is that's the program I'm talking about, is after school, the students they finish the regular school day, buses will come and take most of the students away. About 100 students stay on campus and do this after-school track program. And then once that's finished, it's heavily supervised by adult staff. Once that's supervised, they go back to the building. They get their gear and everything, and then there's special activity buses that then come and pick those students up and take them home. And so they are completely supervised on site all the time. And the only other thing I would say about sports activities is that people can't choose to come to the school or not come to this school. This is their school. And so they're coming here and dropping their kids off expecting school to keep them safe. And I don't want to even go into what's happening recently. Not here to talk about that, what's happened at our high school recently. But I can tell you, I've been on this campus many times over the last 2 years because we've known this project has been coming. And every time I'm there and I go outside, and if you know where the current play structure is, which is sort of like where that blue loop is in the middle, I always see community people who I do not know. And some of them, I don't know them. And they walk right through kids because they can. And we allow it. We haven't gated those gates at all. They're completely open right now. And we're extremely nervous about that. Now, these students are supervised by adults, but we have other strange adults who we do not know going through the campus. And so our first and foremost responsibility as for a school is to keep kids safe. And if kids don't feel safe, you're going to have a hard time teaching them. They're going to have a hard time learning because they're not going to be they don't feel safe. So that's kind of why we get a little freaked out about safety. But at this point, that's why we would want to close the campus off for that. But we would open it up as soon as we could for community use. And again, I really want to stress, we love to make our facilities open to the public. And we look forward for these facilities, which are going to be much improved over the previous facilities. I won't go into all that because that's not why I'm here. But this is going to be a much improved facility for the community as far as play fields and the ability to exercise and get on site and in all kinds of weather. So we're excited about that.
Thank you. Chris?
Just a question. Have you seen any kind of feedback from the police department in terms of like preventative measures in your proposal, or like how they would respond to a active shooter or something like that with these proposals?
Yeah, we'll go into all the details that we do. We actually have a complete school security audit done of our plans, as well as, and then after it's constructed, post-occupancy, there'll be a school security analysis done of the site, and we will do training with our local police department with how they would respond. We don't get involved in that directly because in those situations they control the campus, but yeah, they do train. They'll be trained, and we have an SRO that is split between our middle schools, and so he already has been involved in plan review, but he will also be helping other OCPD understand if we have an incident on site outside on the play fields, how they're going to respond to that.
So not just like response, but like this proposal here with like the corridor idea.
Yeah, I have met with the police chief a little bit about this, and we both have construction projects going on, so we share stories. And he's not a fan of the interior fence, but I don't want to speak for him. But that's a secondhand, you could ask him for an opinion, but generally he doesn't like the corridor idea, as well as putting his officer in a corridor. Not excited about that. I can understand why. We're not excited about the interior fence. But we'll do whatever we need to do because we want to support the community. And, for us, there is some benefit to having it lit early in the morning after 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then in the evening hours. So the bollards lighting is a great idea. We didn't do that at the community college because we have a pathway that isn't surrounded by residences, it's open, so, but that could be a great solution for lighting the path when it is open to the public. So that's definitely something we could look at.
Okay, Alicia?
And then just to jump on what Chris was saying, I'm assuming that the safety plan that the school district has is similar to a SEPTED, to crime prevention through
Yeah, that's
environmental
one.
design
We
plan.
have multiple national standards that we use in
Okay.
our school design. That's one of the main ones, but we have other ones that have been developed, unfortunately, over the last few decades because of school shootings and violent situations on campuses, so.
Okay, because I would assume in the Parks and Rec world, we live a lot, or in SEPTED, and in terms of the light of sight and the lighting, I would think that would immediately flush out the need for lighting and potentially, depending if these trees and bushes, in terms of making sure that the line of sight and the tree lines up in those areas.
Yeah. We have a very experienced landscape architect who's watching those things for us, but yeah, correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Kelly get what she needs.
Yes, thank you. This is extremely helpful, so I really appreciate the discussion. I don't think that any sort of formal motion or anything is needed. You're more than welcome to do that, but I think what I would do is just share what I heard with the Planning Commission and kind of enter the video of this meeting into the record for your project.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's a quasi judicial hearing, and so we'd have to have all the information in the record in case, there are appeals and things like that. So we would just refer to the video of this meeting, and we wouldn't need anything else, I don't think.
Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Okay, we're moving on back to our agenda, item 5B, the PrAC member position openings and appointment recommendations. So, my question to the committee is, do we want to have an informal vote? How would we like to handle this? Go down the line? Any suggestions?
I suggest every person write down their 3 choices, submit them in. Each one that gets 50% on the 3 gets it. Those, if some of them don't get the 50%, then we subject them to a more formal process.
Everyone good with that?
Questions about that first. I have no issues with the process, but it looks like every applicant is from a different neighborhood association, so there's no conflict with that. However, what are the neighborhood association or neighborhoods represented here, just to make sure there's anything we have to be aware of or any conflict? So where are we all from?
We're not going over 2 on any of the neighborhoods.
No, we're not.
That's not my question. My question is, where are each of us from? Which neighbor? I'm from McLaughlin.
Lisa and I are Park Place.
So 2 from Park Place, but none here.
Gaffney.
There's one applicant.
Yeah, there's an applicant.
Wesley Farms.
Brent from Park Place.
Okay. But that's okay, given
Yes,
the
we're
positions that are
both
going to be open, so we're okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then Doug, where are you from?
Wesley Farm.
Say again?
Wesley Farm.
Okay. And then,
And also associated with South End, but I don't think we have anybody from there.
we have, no, not currently, and then, I'm sorry.
I'm outside.
Okay, I thought we had 1, so you're outside, and so that doesn't conflict. Okay, so there is absolutely 0 conflict.
No, there's none.
I'm done. I like Doug's idea.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Do we have a sheet for that, or we just write it down
I
somewhere?
printed one at home.
Look at you.
If it's
Just
any
gonna-
consolation, I do not envy your choices here. You had 5 really well thought out candidates that each brought a lot of different strengths and opportunities. You have people with a lot of experience, you have people with children, you have people that are newer to the community with fresh eyes, so I don't think you can go wrong on your choices.
Yeah,
Does everybody have something to write
bring
on?
in some new skill sets.
I would say so. Anybody?
Here's mine, my ballot. Does
Lisa,
anyone need paper?
I do, please.
Okay. Anyone else?
Denise?
And you guys are sticking to 3 per person, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If someone's not following directions, we'd like to know who it is.
So far, out of the 2 I've received, they've all
It's probably me, actually.
Yeah, I was
followed
gonna
directions.
say.
Most likely.
The likely suspect is. That get everybody when Kristen got.
Chris, and we got Doug.
Get my little one.
Oh, but here, leave that. Don't lose the little one.
Little ones matter.
Little ones are people too.
That's right.
It's going to take a few minutes if you guys want to take a break or,
What if we move on and come back?
yeah.
We can do
We've
that.
had lots of breaks tonight.
Okay, item 5C on our agenda, prac goals.
Oh, that's me again, isn't it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's not a good
We can
plan.
come back.
Although Troy and Chris could
Yeah,
explain
I
it
don't-
since you couldn't find it.
No, this is not you, Don. You don't need to worry about this, I don't think.
Or we could jump to member reports.
Well, we do member reports.
There you go. Let's do member reports. Who'd like to start, left or right? Mr. Neely.
Well, most things I'm involved with now are associated with the watershed councils and the Natural Resource Committee. And, but I took a very nice trip down the Clackamas River. It was one organized by the Metro and the Clackamas Basin Watershed Council. And we've got a wonderful river. The Clackamas River is a tremendous river, and going down it, it's a dynamic river. And if nobody's had the opportunity, it is a recreational opportunity for Oregon City to go further up. I didn't know there was so many islands in the river, and actually on the way they pointed out where no more than I think 2007, where the river actually changed course, and they pointed out where it went. Closer to 224 at one point, and then now it's further from 224. So dynamic changes occur on that river, and it's nice to have a city that has 2 rivers.
Very cool.
Who sponsored that?
It was, I should say more specifically, but it is the Clackamas River Basin Watershed Council and also the Metro, our representative from Metro and the Open Spaces piece.
Okay, Chris.
I really don't have anything, just some parting comments. I've really appreciated and enjoyed my time working on the committee. And I've worked with a lot of different personalities and ideas, and it's really been interesting and educational, and I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia.
Nothing to comment.
Okay, Jeff.
Well, one of my other volunteer positions is with the Clackamas County Aging Services Council, and we've had a couple of meetings here recently centered on behavioral health, and I was really quite surprised to find out that the number 3 killer is loneliness. Congestive heart failure is number 1, diabetes number 2, and loneliness is the number 3 killer. But the thing that really distressed me the most, and being on Aging Services Council, I would have thought that it's the boomer generation and what have you that suffers the most from loneliness. No, it's not. It's Generation Z, our children, are at higher risk for suicide through loneliness than any other age group. And part of that is because of the tendency of our younger generations to be more involved with their electronics than they are with outdoor activities and social face-to-face, hand-to-hand embracing activities. And I think that is One of the things that I'm really delighted to be involved with both the Aging Services Council and Behavioral Health and this council is that I think those two things really dovetail with each other. We can do a lot to modify, take care of this problem of loneliness through parks and recreation, getting people together, getting them active, getting them to socialize, and maybe dropping that suicide rate. Oregon is very high in suicide rate.
Jeff, those are really great comments. Thank you. Yeah, it's an eye-opener too, as well. Well, speaking for myself, this is my last meeting. It's been a great 3 years, and thank you all, everyone, each and every one of you. I really appreciate it. I'll be remaining with Oregon City Parks Foundation, so hopefully we can develop partnerships as we move forward. So just thank you for everyone. Appreciate it. Derek.
I wanted to thank everyone, Lisa and Chris and the folks that are leaving that segued me in here and taught me everything I know in the last 10 months, not including Karen. But Parkways, I checked out Promenade. I can't remember if I even said that. What a neat area, what a view from there, honestly didn't know that kind of little narrow thing existed, but other than that, that's about where I'm at. Go ahead.
Okay. And I'm going to miss you and Chris. Saturday, November 16th at the cemetery, Doug joined us. The Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War did a memorial ceremony because it was 2 days before the dedication of the cemetery at Gettysburg. And they have a gentleman that does a fantastic Lincoln imitation who read the Gettysburg Address. But the ceremony was the culmination of marking unmarked Civil War veterans' graves at the cemetery. We have placed all the headstones. Sons of Union Veterans are wonderful. They order them, they put them in. Everything's done.
Wow.
So every Civil War veteran at Mountain View Cemetery is now marked in some way, either private or military headstone.
Right.
And now I'm looking at other wars. But also thanks to Margarella Harding, who originally introduced me to the Sons of Union Veterans. They got a hold of Raymond Rendelman at the Oregon City News, and he did a beautiful article, and there was probably 50 people there in addition to the members of the organization. Joyce was there, and Doug was there. So that was the big experience we've had at one of those ceremonies.
Yeah,
So things move ahead up there.
I missed that. Thank you. Troy?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
You know me, I'm always over here quiet.
Who are you?
Can I make a comment? Jeff, before the trees grew higher, you actually had a view of the waterfall from that site.
Yes.
And every once in a while, I wonder if, and it's something we might want to weigh in at one point, whether there should be some selective cutting of trees in our parkland that will give us a view. Concerned about the Mountain View Cemetery. We do have a mountain view, but it's...
We used to.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you can get to certain points where you can see it, but you could see it from, I think, the mausoleum before. I'm not sure you can anymore. So I'm not suggesting what should be cut, but I'm suggesting it might be a topic of discussion. Are there certain scenic views that we've lost that might be brought back with some very, very selective cutting of trees? And those trees can actually become part of the environment they are, providing, a habitat for critters that live under logs and so forth. So that might be something, it's not on our goals, but that might be something we want to consider.
When ODOT scaled from the tunnel south, I asked John Lewis and Phil about the face of the bluff there. And there was kind of it's them, it's the railroad, and it turned out that no, it's park property. But the reason that ODOT did the tree removal is because it's dangerous on that basalt.
Yeah.
And I suggested that, we really need to look at that face on both sides of the elevator and selectively remove some of the trees.
Well, maybe we should put that in one of the
Add
goals.
it to a goal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah, because
idea.
we're gonna end up with basalt on a train. I understand the steps are closed again. So,
Well, I walked them the other day. They were working, so they're open. The workmen were
but there's
working.
rocks falling on your head.
But that's
Just look up,
That's
you'll be
fine. That's fine.
Okay, so, yep,
More stuff to do.
remember when we're doing our goals next year, Doug.
So do we have results?
Yes.
And?
The three that were selected, based on the tallies that, I did on here, Sean Dackler, okay, Andy Crum, and Brett Haverkamp
Did they get 50%?
were the highest vote getters. Yes.
They all got 50% of the votes.
Yes.
Okay.
Brent had 5 votes, Andy had 6, and Sean had 8.
Wow.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Would you like to put that into a motion for me?
Yes.
I'll move that that slate of 3 has been voted in.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Bear in mind, it's a recommendation to the mayor for appointment.
Yes.
Correct, yes.
I think we can just simply do it.
He has to do roll call.
Do we need, okay, roll call.
Is that
So you
what we
need
did?
to- Yeah.
Okay.
Aye.
Christopher. Alicia.
Aye.
Jeff. Aye. Lisa.
Aye.
Derek.
Aye.
Karen.
Aye.
Troy.
Aye.
Let the record show, unanimous.
Okay. We've covered that. Pratt Golds.
One of the things, because I am here for a relatively short time, one of the things that I've tried to do, or taking a look at doing, is considering my time here kind of a two-pronged mission, one of which is to work on being that bridge between Phil and whoever the next person is, and trying to put together a plan for that smooth transition, if you will, between the two directors. And that kind of falls into a couple of different categories: a smooth transition for staff, a smooth transition for the community, and a smooth transition for the PrAC. But also a smooth transition for that director who's coming on board. One of the things that I think would be very helpful in doing that for that director is to be able to, on their first day, be able to come in and have a clearly defined set of goals that the PrAC is working towards. So one of the things I wanted to do was to try and find those goals. So I went back through, I found the ones that were attached to the document that were shown in January. I took a look at all the different agendas, trying to find, well, where do they adopt these goals? And I honestly couldn't find them. They resurfaced again in September. And so I wanted to put them back in front of you and ask how you want staff to proceed with these. I also, selfishly want to do the best job I can do on your behalf. And in order to do that, I need to develop my own work plans that will fit your needs. And so I'm not just asking about the transition part now, I'm asking about how I can best fit your needs and how I can best, in the time I'm here, move those balls as far forward as possible. So for my sake, I'm hoping that at some point we can finalize those goals in the next meeting or two, unless, you have a way of telling me how you want to move forward with them.
I'll start, and thank you for that, Don. I strongly recommend that we revisit this in January with the new committee.
Yeah. I agree.
I agree. And so what the document that's attached to the agenda here is not what
No, we didn't.
we submitted to Phil.
And you want me to give the background on that for Dawn?
Yeah, so what we did, Don, Troy and I were tasked with looking at the current goals and coming up with a format that's a little bit more user-friendly and gives us a way of tracking where we're at with them and including measures of success. So that this is out on the public website. It's not just a list of goals. It actually shows where we're at with them and up-to-date notes on what needs to be done or where we're at with the individual goals. So,
Could you send that to me?
yeah, sure.
I'll do that if you want.
Okay.
Because we had been working on it, and you clearly don't have what Phil has or had.
do.
So we can get that to you. And so the goals, we've already approved the goals that you have there. But in the discussion in September is where it came up that some of us weren't comfortable with the format because it wasn't trackable.
Okay.
And so they were more of ideas versus, yes, it was done. And to Chris's point, if we're going to tell the public what we're going to do, they should be able to hold us accountable to doing that. And so Chris and I were working on the format, not the goals themselves, not changing anything that we all wanted, but just the format, and then bring that back through Phil. And then just basically approving the format, making sure everyone's clear on it without changing the goals. And then to Lisa's point, we also had in the past reviewed those about every year, but we had, I think it was also the September meeting, but at some point we had asked Phil to continue to put that on the agenda. I don't think we said every meeting, but I think we agreed, if I'm not mistaken, every quarter.
Every quarter.
Because the problem we had is we forget about them and talk about them every year. And then we look back and we haven't done any of them because we kind of forgot we even had them, right? And so the idea was bring them back about once a quarter, see how we're doing, maybe take some off if they're done. We had some at the bottom that were also more of just priorities but not goals. Maybe it's time to move those up because, maybe a master plan's now done. This can be part of the goal, whatever. Some of them maybe would get moved down just depending on what we discussed. And so the idea is bring them back every quarter.
Okay. Yeah, if you could forward me that.
Yeah.
Phil did a great job of laying out a lot of information for me. Unfortunately, it's, sometimes things get overlooked.
Sure, no, that's fine. Yeah, we can say, because we worked on the format, like I said, we didn't change any goals, but we worked on the format, and then we can put that in the agenda
That would be
to talk about in January.
And one clarification, they're 2-year goals. We're on the biennium with the city.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
And just to add on that, we talked about we want visibility for the public to see what we're working on and how we're doing on that, and have them hold us accountable. But I would also expect the mayor and the commission to do the same thing, is to check in on our goals and see where we're at, and are we doing our job? Are we seeing success? And if not, ask why. So I think it's a two-way street.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
There's nothing else on that topic. We'll jump a little bit to item 7, staff reports, and 7A, the Tyrone Woods Memorial Park.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that the plans have been submitted to the planning department for their review and approvals. We'll be able to move into permitting fairly quickly once that is complete. Receive those permits. We'll also be going out, our desire is to go out early next year for bidding on the construction of the project. One of the questions that I've been asked by our chair, Lisa, was why did it grind to a halt for a while? I have spent some time talking to a number of people, looking at a few different things, and while I don't have a definitive answer for you, I do have some things that maybe could have been managed a little bit differently. That would account for a certain amount of time lag within the project itself. And I think one of the things that was probably the most startling that I found was when the budget was prepared, when the grants were requested, when the contract was let for the design team, when the initial design was done and moved on and all the way up to the 80% design. The assumption was that the park would be responsible for doing the half-street improvements on 2 of the 3 streets. It became evident at a certain point that the street improvements needed to be made on all 3 sides of the park. At that point, the project was not adequately funded. And so I believe at that point, Phil kind of put the brakes on the project or slowed the project down, trying to figure out what to do, how to proceed. Now, whether that was relayed on to the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, I don't know. But from what I can see, that was one of the biggest drags on the procedure. My direction to the architect, we were at 80% completion on the drawings when I came on board, was to get the drawings done as quickly as possible. That we want to move forward with the bidding, and when we do that bidding, we're going to need to do it in such a way that allows for potential phasing of the construction of the park. Okay. So we're going to develop a bid package that will come out in kind of the old smorgasbord style or the option style that will allow for the bidders to be able to assign a dollar value for each of the primary larger elements, whether that's the dog park or the shelter or the different elements to go with it. That is what needs to be done, and then only after we have that information will we be able to make logical choices to say, yeah, given all the physical requirements we absolutely have to do, such as the street improvements, these are the things that are left over that we can do with the funds that we have and complete those tasks and move on and get that park built, and then begin the next phases as we can find that money to move forward with. The other thing that I think that where maybe we as staff have lacked on that project is the management of expectations. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people make the assumption that just because, there's funding available, there's land available, boy, we can build that park, real quickly. And sometimes the reality is just the opposite of that. It does take time. Yet the community gets ahead, and we don't necessarily do a good enough job of explaining what all the different steps are and how long each of those steps really take. When the master plan is done, there's the expectation of, we'll be able to build the park right away. Not necessarily the case, because after that, you have to start developing your construction documents. And then once those are done, you have to start developing your bid package. I've seen some nodding heads from somebody that's been down this road before.
Yeah.
And then once those are done, you can actually move forward. And then sometimes you have to do the value engineering. And in this case, because of the naming situation, my sense is that it became a very emotional life of its own, so to speak. And you had the other group, the outside group, the VFW, that were very excited about it, and rightfully so, and going out and doing fundraising. And frankly, their pace outpaced our pace. And as a result, I think that's where some of that friction came into place. And the best way to describe it is just simply, I don't think we did a good job as staff of managing those expectations and those timelines.
So
and
realistic
explaining what
schedule.
those really are.
Yeah.
So I will do my best to make sure to keep you all well informed as to what those timelines are and what those expectations are. And we will do an update every time that we get a significant piece to the puzzle. We'll send out information to you. We'll report during the meetings themselves, and we'll keep you informed along the way. And I will make contact with the VFW and make sure that they understand that too.
Thank you, Don. That's really helpful. So a realistic
I have a
schedule.
few comments I want to get out.
Yeah.
You have
So, trying to think where to start and not to be too blunt, but in my line of work, we use a tool called a retrospective after a large project. It's very useful to sit down, talk about the things that went well, talk about the things that didn't go well, and how do we make sure the things that didn't go well happen again. I strongly encourage this group to have a retrospective on this process, because right now we don't do things very well as a city in terms of planning and execution, from what I've seen. There was a lack of transparency, a lack of communication, and frankly, a lack of accountability during this process. And when the story hit the press recently, I was embarrassed. I really was. I really appreciate your comments, Don, and I have a lot of confidence in you, and you're saying the right things. I would love to see that happen, but we can't do this again. This was not a good process. this whole street thing, this first I've heard of it. Ridiculous.
Well,
And it's not your fault. I understand that.
apologize on behalf of staff,
Yeah, but it's
current and
it's
past.
one of a laundry list of things that we didn't know about
Yeah.
or hear about. And the fact, I think the last straw for me was when we heard that the grant money was not used and had to be submitted for an extension, which was risky.
Successful, but yes,
Successful, but
there is
risky.
always a risk.
So anyway, I would encourage a retrospective as this group, maybe a work session outside of a meeting, and just talk about things that went well. Sean has a lot of history that he can bring, a lot of communications and conversations that he had and he and I had with commission and the mayor. But I think that would be eye-opening and useful for the future. So
I
that's
agree.
it. I'm done.
Good comment.
Lisa, may I?
Yes.
Thank you for the transparency. That's the best we've gotten ever.
Yeah.
And you're the new guy. Like, this is good.
New guy here,
Well, you knew, thank you.
been
Yes.
around for a while.
No, and we appreciate that. I mean, that's, I appreciate the transparency. And you had mentioned kind of the VFW, Chris said Sean, and so just to clarify, that Sean Dashler, who was an applicant, was on PrAC before, was on the naming committee for Tyrone Woods, is a member of the VFW, and is very passionate about this. So from many sides of this coin, Sean is your guy to talk to, and he'll kind of spearhead it from the VFW side, and you'll hear it in his voice, he's very passionate about this, so he's probably your guy.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
And
Any
thank you.
other questions or comments regarding this topic? Thank you again.
No problem.
Appreciate it. All right, moving on to item 8, future agenda items. Item 8A, list of future agenda items. Any comments on this? Questions?
Can I make a comment regarding this?
Please.
When I put the agenda together, and again, sorry about the double duplicate. The way I looked at these, and again, this is from my perspective, and the way I've worked in the past, is even though I don't intend to speak about each of these projects tonight, frankly, I don't plan on speaking about any of them other than what I just did with the Tyrone Woods Memorial Park. One of the things I heard was the loss of continuity in these projects, the loss of continuity and communication regarding these projects, or the ability to these projects. I think somebody said, gee, we hear about it in January or February, and we say we'll deal with that in September, and somewhere between that point and that point, it falls off the table. What I'm trying to do is create a table that doesn't fall off. So when I have these on here, this is an opportunity, again, in my past experience, for you guys to put date certains on those, to ask, for updates, or say, we want to talk about it then. And if you tell me that you want to talk about the Buena Vista House in September, we will write right after that on the agenda between now and the date that you pick for that, the date that we're going to talk about that park. And so that we will have it out there for everybody to see, you, me, the next director, when that's going to be back on for discussion. And we will make sure that we don't lose those things off the table.
Great idea.
Thank you.
I've got a request, not on these items, although I have a question on an item, but it gives an example. One of the commissioners put forward a motion to give a certain amount of funds to the Buena Vista House. Not only did that not come to us, it was brought up at a meeting that was not on the agenda. And I talked to the our previous director, and they said anytime something comes up that it should involve PrAC, and somebody's going to try to take action on it, that you say that this ought to go to the advisory committee first. It's really difficult for us to have these things come up, and we weren't part of the process. And then that's not saying the decisions the commission made were wrong. I'm not making any comment on that whatsoever. Another thing that I would like to have come up, we just all learned, I think, recently that the Cove project is essentially funding has fallen through. And
I'm sorry, the what?
the Clackamas Cove project,
Oh,
the
okay.
development there.
Sure.
But what I'd like to have some discussion of is this thing, the process is going to continue on. That Cove project, the whole Cove, that whole area there, including the Cove itself, was procured many years ago in the late 90s, actually, by Urban Renewal, so it belongs to the Urban Renewal District. I would like to see a discussion that once that development occurs, then the lands actually become parklands. The Cove itself, the areas around the bank actually become part of our park system, because I don't think there's any identification of how that land is going, what's going to happen to it once the development has occurred. And so that's one thing I'd like to see a discussion of at one point. Okay. And since this deal has fallen through, perhaps it's a good time to bring it up as the commission the Urban Renewal Commission tries to figure out its next steps in the process.
I think one of the things that would be helpful for staff is for us to develop a way of adding to this list. And I don't mean any offense by this, but sometimes what is one person's desire to talk about a project or a place or a situation doesn't necessarily match the needs of all the members.
Yeah.
From my previous experience, in order to add things to topics of the agenda or to get things scheduled on there, we would require a couple things. One would be a request from the chair to add to the agenda, or in this case the ongoing portion of the agenda, or to have two members make that request directly to the director. That's how I had done it in Ashland. Now, whatever way we want to do it is fine by me, but I just want to make sure that when we're adding things to the agenda, it's not just my opinion or one other member's opinion of it. It has a certain process that goes through. That way we can keep our meetings in a reasonably streamlined fashion and move forward. Now, one of the things, and I don't know, and I'm sure Phil has done this in the past, but one of the things that I've always prided myself on is when I get ready to set the agenda, I try and contact the chair and the vice chair and talk a little bit about what needs to go onto those agendas and why. And I did this time with the chair and the vice chair. I spent time talking about what needs to go on. I put together the agenda, and then staff person who was reviewing it and helping me with some things pointed out a couple of points to it. And so I made a couple of minor options, and I tried to reach back out and say, well, gee, you'll notice that there is no approval of minutes on this. And the reason why is I'm trying to find the minutes. This afternoon, I got access to Phil's H drive, and I'm reasonably certain I'm going to find some minutes in there. But until then, that's where it is. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and let you know that I am listening, I am writing down, I am keeping track, but I also need to make sure that what I put on this agenda fits
I was
the
talking
needs
about
of
as a future agenda item, an additional future agenda item.
I appreciate that.
On boards that I've been on in the past, it's worked the same way. It goes through the chair.
Okay.
I think that makes sense because I know there's times that the agenda can appear a little bit of a surprise, but this is a way to keep the chair in the loop.
Right.
There's going to be some things that come from staff, right? But anything that's not coming from staff, I think should go through the chair. It's not a lot of work for the chair to take a look at that email that I send her, and she forwards it and says, Don, please add this, and CC me, thanks Troy, and that's it. That doesn't take much. But that way she's kind of in the loop. So when she shows up with the agenda, she's like, yep, I remember these things. We talked about them. I think that helps.
Yeah.
I guess my last comment also is my door is always open. Just give me a call. I'd love to sit down. I enjoy a good cup of coffee. And so anytime anybody wants to have a cup or just want to talk about something, just give me a holler. I'll get some time and be happy to sit down. So, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
I don't see the Pratt goals on this future agenda item. So maybe we should add that.
Yes.
Since we just talked about it, right?
Good point.
And we will
I
add
assume
that. for
I assume a
January.
future agenda item will be voting for a new chair.
That's the January.
Not everything
meeting, yes.
will need to be on the future
Yeah.
agenda items, of course.
Well, and just one question. Property acquisition makes me slightly uncomfortable on the future agenda, since that's usually executive session
Yeah, well,
until everything's blessed.
yes, I'm fully aware of that, and I would never list a specific property.
Is dog park a separate item or is that a sub?
Just got indented by accident.
Okay,
No,
so that
we're
was,
buying properties for dog parks.
that's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's a typo.
Okay, fair enough. Just want to make sure we're clear.
That's a tab button. This finger right there.
So it's not property acquisition for dog parks?
No, that's a left little finger
Crack
problem.
is officially going to the dogs.
Sorry, I'm not the best type.
No, that's okay. Just want to clarify.
If there's nothing else, any other questions, comments? Thanks to everyone. Really appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.